Hello everyone, and welcome to another Curated Commander First Impressions, the series where I give my mostly blind reaction to upcoming Commander Precons. My name is Grazzet, and as usual, we have my co-host Kaprak joining us to provide the contents of the Precon to me, as well as to weigh in with his opinions as well. So Kaprak, we're halfway done with the first impressions for Bloomburrow. How are you feeling so far?
I like them, though it is a bit of a whiplash from the Modern Horizons decks.
Yeah, that's a kind way to say that, yeah. I mean, full disclosure, haven't been too impressed with the contents of these decks so far, but let's see if the second half can bring it back for me.
Both of these are two-color decks. They're probably going to be a little bit more focused. And the first of the two is going to be Animated Army.
All right, Animated Army, two-color, Gruul, make trash, do smash. You know, when I think animated, Gruul is not the first thing that comes to mind.
It isn't, but I see no reason it shouldn't. Green is a color of enchantments. Red is a color of artifacts. You could make this work.
I mean, yeah. I can't remember what the face commander does. It's been a while since I saw him, but I would think with a name like this, you would be just animating your back row, bringing it to the forefront, and then smashing face with it. But these are not colors that generally do that, so I am very curious to see what this does.
My guess is it's a very traditional Azorius, like, quote-unquote, back row deck. Those are usually a lot more control-y. This is just going to be the Gruul version, where you just punch them in the face repeatedly until they go down.
All right. Well, we'll see what it has. Let's see what the face commander has in store for us.
Well, just to get back into it, I know you've seen him, but again, you've forgotten him. The face commander is Bello, Bard of the Brambles. 1 in a Gruul, get you a legendary Raccoon Bard, 3/3. During your turn, each non-equipment artifact and each non-aura enchantment you control, with mana value 4 or greater, is a 4/4 elemental creature in addition to its other types, and has indestructible haste. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card.
Okay, so 3 mana nets you a pretty standard stat block for the cost. And we get the repeatable ability to turn our back row, our non-equipment artifacts and non-aura enchantments of high CMC into 4/4 beat sticks that are resilient, can swing in as soon as we cast them, and if they get in for damage, they generate continual card advantage, which overall is pretty solid, no lie.
He's a very tight package, and he curves perfectly into the first thing that he can animate.
The question here is, non-equipment and non-aura is kind of sort of restrictive because generally those are the ones that you're going to be putting in decks that just want to go face and do huge amounts of damage. So we are looking at a lot of alternate kind of back row, and they have to be CMC 4 or greater, which can make this kind of slow, but we are in Gruul, so the ramp package should be pretty good.
I believe the term used for a lot of these things is quote-unquote do-nothing artifacts or do-nothing enchantments. Typically things that you play that then just sort of sit there, and in recent years, you get lucky when they have an end-of-turn trigger. Usually they have an upkeep trigger. Sometimes they have a passive effect.
Yeah, that's true. Do-nothings tend to feel bad because your opponents can generally just blow them out before you can do anything with them, but in this particular case, you cast them on your main one and you can swing with them in your combat phase, which means they're not do-nothings anymore, are they?
They at least might net you a card, even if they immediately get blown out when it's not your turn.
Yeah. And if anything, they can just take down whatever blocks them if it's smaller than them. So either way, you're building up your board presence. Yeah, this is an interesting way to take Gruul. It's an interesting direction to take Gruul that I really haven't seen before.
It's different, and I love it because it's going to lead to really interesting board states where, like, your enchantments that would never be tapped in a million years are tapped for some reason.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the 99 of this deck holds, but I see a lot of potential with this guy. The game plan is pretty straightforward, just cast big back row and swing face, but it's an interesting direction to take Gruul in.
I see a lot of potential where, depending on how your board gets developed, you might get yourself a 2-mana 4/4 with indestructible and haste that you no longer want to tap for mana.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
But yeah, obviously there are 2 commanders in this deck. The other one is a little bit more straightforward, which is saying something because our last guy was pretty straightforward. This is Wildseer Scouring Maw. 3 in a Gruul, get you a 6/6 legendary elemental wolf with trample, and enchantment spells you cast from your hand have Cascade.
Okay, there's not a lot of text on this guy, but yeah, he does quite a bit actually.
Yes.
You're getting an above average stat block for the cost, trampling stat block at that, but that's not really what we care about. What we care about is that effectively every single enchantment spell we cast is 2 enchantments, or 2 spells, but generally we're going to be chock full of enchantments in this particular build, I guess, to take the maximum amount of advantage out of him. But yeah, this guy can generate a lot of value, I think.
It is also worth mentioning, this does not say non-aura enchantments, so your auras can cascade. This does not say non-creature enchantments, so your enchantment creatures can cascade.
Yeah, that's true. You can take this guy in a lot of different directions, I think. If you want to Voltron him up, you just load him up with auras, and those auras fetch other auras that you can make him bigger with. You can do what the face commander wants to do, just do a bunch of quote-unquote do-nothing enchantments that he just gets 2 of every time you cast one. The potential for this guy is good too. Yeah, I like both of these commanders, honestly.
They are both really straightforward and really obvious what you want to do with them, but you can kind of do some different things. Like Wild Seer, as you said, you can go really wide and just try to get a ton of value off a bunch of weird enchantments. You can Voltron him up.
Both of these feel like they can take advantage of back row rather well, but the directions they go in is unique enough that makes them their own flavor. So yeah, these both look good. I can't really complain about them.
Nice. Well, I guess that means it's time to move on to the other 8 new cards in this deck.
Yep, let's see what they have in store for us.
Okay, just to start us off, we have the first of the new cards. Nice, simple, sweet. Trail Tracker Scout. For 1 and a green, you get a 1/3 Raccoon Scout that can tap to add 1 mana of any color. And it says whenever you expend 8, return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand.
Remind me again what expend does.
That is when you spend 8 mana on spells, you get that effect.
8 mana on spells.
Yes, it doesn't have to be 1 spell. It can be across 2, 3. You can cast 8 1-mana spells.
Across the turn.
Yes, on 1 turn. It can be any turn. It doesn't have to be yours. But you do have to spend 8 mana total. And then you get to bring a permanent back to hand.
Okay. So, on the face of it, we have a 2-drop mana dork, 1/3, so that's a defensive stat block. Fixes for any colors. We're in 2. That doesn't really matter too much since we're in 2 colors. But that expend 8 is pretty good. That should be fairly easy to do, especially because we're aiming to hit CMC 4+ spells, right? Or CMC 4+ enchantments.
Or artifacts, but yes. Like, as a mana dork, it's a 2-mana mana dork that is any color, which is fine. There are better options that are more protected. 3 toughness is fine. It's boltable. You don't bolt in this format, but 3 is sort of like the cutoff for where you can commonly find easy damage-based removal. Once you get 4 or any other kind of protection, it gets a lot juicier. So, like, it's a fine card in a series of cards similar to itself. It's just, if you think you're consistently going to be spending 8 mana a turn, this becomes an incredible value engine.
Yeah, because this is functionally getting you an Eternal Witness every time you spend 8 mana. It's limited to permanent, so maybe It's not as good. But you do have the option to get a lot of recursion out of this in a big mana deck, in a ramp-heavy deck, and we're in colors that can do both of those things very well.
Ironically enough, I don't necessarily think that this is the card for this deck. I think there might be a world where some kind of very heavy loop-based deck is going to want to play 8 mana worth of spells in a turn. Somehow one of them gets put in your graveyard and you can return the said permanent to your hand and just start doing some really tight loops turn after turn. This might enable something a little degenerate, but again, it's only once per turn because it's just your 8th, not your 16th.
Yeah, I can see that happening. If you've got something that you can sacrifice when it's on board, get it into your bin, get to the 8, get it right back, something like that. Yeah, I like it. It's a 2-cost mana dork with upside. You really can't complain about that.
It's an absolutely fine card that I think is going to have a spot in places, but again, it's something that's going to blow you away.
Yeah.
Up next, we have yet another raccoon, Prosperous Bandit. For 2 and a red, you get a 2/2 raccoon rogue with Offspring 1 and First Strike, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many tapped treasure tokens.
Okay. 3 mana gets you a 2/2 First Striker. Not the best stats for that. It's not that hard to just survive the 2 damage this guy can output. Offspring gets you another one, so you get a 1/1 First Striker if you're willing to pay 4 mana. And then we have a on damage treasure creation, so ramp.
Yes.
It's fine. I think it's too small without any reliable way to get in. First Strike is nice, but on a small stat block, it's less nice.
We're in red, which can easily pump that first number. It's in a Gruul deck, which can easily pump the creature as a whole. This is innocuous, and it's the kind of thing that no one's going to go like, oh, that needs to die now. But in the right deck, utilized properly, this might just randomly get you like 6 treasures.
Yeah, maybe in a dedicated treasure-focused deck that can get this guy in reliably. I can see that. I can see the argument for keeping him in or putting him in, but I'm unsure if this deck has the tools to enable this guy to be able to get reliably in for damage. That's my concern. And even then, this is slower than it looks on the tin because those treasures do come into play tapped. So no,
Yes.
it's not like you can get mana on your main 2 that you can immediately use to cast a bigger spell. You do have to wait an entire rotation unless we do shenanigans to have them come into play untapped, which exist, but are shenanigans.
I think there are ways that you're going to comfortably get this out on 2, and it's going to get degenerate. And I don't just mean, Soul Ring starts. I mean, like Ancient Tomb starts and stuff like that.
Yeah, but if you're rocking Ancient Tombs, you got better stuff to cast than this.
Yeah, but it's the fact that this is just another piece of early ramp in the right kind of like medium red deck, big red, and on the Soul Ring starts again. That's Magical Christmas Land, but this is also turn 2 Offspring.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I can see this guy generating value in very specific circumstances, but most of the time when you drop this guy, people are probably going to have blockers. And depending on where you are in the turn rotation, you may not even be able to swing in with this guy once. And then it's just, well, I don't have a real ramp piece, and I could have had a Cultivate, I could have had a Kodama's Reach for the same cost, gotten my ramp, and had an extra land drop the following turn. So the 3-drop slot for ramp is tight, especially when you're in green.
Yeah, like, again, I think this card, while it does definitely have a low floor, I think it has a really high ceiling.
Yeah, I can see this pulling its weight in more treasure-dedicated decks, and I can see the argument for putting it in. I just think it may have trouble keeping its spot in this particular deck.
Yes, I can agree with that much. But moving on, I think this is the first one of these we've had on here. It is Brightcap Badger / Fungus Frolic. We have an adventure creature in the Commander set. I'll start with the adventure. 2 and a green gets you an instant adventure that says create 2/1/1 green sapling creature tokens. And then for 3 and a green, you've got a 3/4 Badger Druid that says each fungus and sapling you control has tap, add a green mana. At the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token.
Okay, so more ramp with extra steps, it looks like.
It's more ramp with extra steps. That's also a little bit of a go-wide spell.
Yeah, I mean, let's not mince words here. This ramp is pretty good. Because the play pattern would be you play this on, let's say, your opponent's turn. Before the turn gets back to you, you get your Saplings. You drop this on 4. On the subsequent turn, when you have the mana, you turn those 2 Saplings into Mana Dorks, and then you just continue to make more and more Mana Dorks as the game progresses, which is going to be able to get you a lot of mana in the long run if this thing stays alive.
Yes.
And, you're not going to turn away mana when you, again, are looking to cast CMC 4+ spells consistently to enable the face commander. So yeah, I can see this guy pulling his weight rather well here too.
I don't think this deck is trying to get to 4. I think this deck is trying to get to 8.
Yeah, 8, 12, 16, probably degenerate amounts of mana to get as many of these big enchantments out as possible. I can definitely see that. But yeah, this guy is a bit more reliable than the raccoon we just looked at because he doesn't really need to do anything other than exist on the battlefield in order to generate us mana, which is what I like in my ramp pieces.
It is also a green card, and it is also definitely something that is a bit more threatening and will get taken down faster.
Yeah, it's true, but you're wasting a kill spell on a mana dork, and that never feels good.
It's a 3/4 that generates 1/1 every turn. It's a little more than a mana dork.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, so moving up next, we have another creature, Evercoat Ursine. 4 and a green, you get a 6/5 elemental bear with trample, hideaway 3, and whenever Evercoat Ursine deals combat damage to a player, if there are any cards exiled with it, you may play one of them without paying its mana cost.
Okay, so Big Green got another piece for it, I guess, because this is pretty good, all things considered. 5 mana for a 6/5 Trampler. On the face of it, it's an overstated stat block with a reliable way to get in for damage. And Hideaway 3x2 is just going to be able to get us 2 free spells over the course of its life. Best case scenario.
Most likely, yeah. Maybe you hit a land off one of them, but
I mean, Hideaway 3 is a top 3, so that's still pretty good odds you're going to be able to hit something big and juicy off of this.
Yeah, probably.
This one's pretty straightforward, but honestly, sometimes you just turn a big thing sideways, get in for damage, and get additional upside off of it. That tends to just be good, right?
Mm-hmm. Like, again, if this gets killed, technically you are losing those spells.
Yeah, they stay in exile.
So there's a small downside to it. And this is definitely something that is going to immediately, people are going to go, okay, that could have an Eldrazi under it. It has to die.
Yeah, this gets better if the deck has haste enablers, because you can bring it down, potentially get one of the hideaway spells immediately. One of the hideaway cards, that is. But yeah, I can see this being potentially a liability if you don't have a way to reliably get it to swing in as soon as it comes down, because your opponents just kill it and then you lose the cards that you tucked under it. So yeah, that's not a feel-good moment there.
Yeah, you definitely need to You need to evaluate the situation when you're playing something like this, because you can go all in and try to hit it big, but
you run the risk of it blowing up in your face if your
Yes.
opponents think you're like stacking gigantic degenerate stuff under here that you're going to be able to cast for free. So if you know your opponent has open mana, if you know that board wipe is potentially coming, maybe don't play this into that type of board state.
yeah, this is a very, very high threat card.
Yeah. When you can get anything into play for free, it's dangerous.
Yeah. So the next one is Pyreswipe Hawk. For 3 and 2 red, you get a 4/4 elemental bird with flying and haste. Whenever Pyreswipe Hawk attacks, it gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. And whenever you expend 6, gain control up to 1 target artifact for as long as you control Pyreswipe Hawk.
Okay. 5 mana nets you a decent-sized, hasty flying body that gets bigger depending on how big of an artifact we control on our side of the battlefield. And if we spend a lot of mana, we can just start jacking people's artifacts, which in Commander can range anywhere from mana rocks all the way up to gigantic degenerate back row pieces. Yeah, this is pretty good. Gets extra damage into our opponents reliably because it's evasive and it can make itself bigger, and then serves as a piece of targeted removal that we can use over and over again by us just casting our spells.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call 6 big because, you're casting this on 5.
Yeah, you just need 1 more mana and then you can just start jacking people's artifacts. So honestly, yeah, you can get a lot of mileage out of this guy.
It is a relatively straightforward card. It's a little small for 5 mana, but it's got flying and haste, so you can't complain. And it's just gonna start punching. It's probably gonna swing in the first time for 6. You're probably gonna at least have a rock.
The downside is this goes and all the things you stole go back, right?
If this dies, yes.
Yeah. So this gets better if the deck has ways to sacrifice artifacts for value. And we're in Gruul. Gruul has a couple of ways to do that. So we'll just have to see if this particular deck has the means to do that, because if it does, this thing gets even better. And it's already pretty good.
Again, it's an absolutely fine card. It's going to be good where it goes. But as a generic card, it's fine.
Yeah, this shines when you can reliably spend that mana during the course of the turn to reliably get use out of that last ability.
Mm-hmm. Not a heck of a lot to say here. It is a very straightforward card. Gruul we smash, but artifact.
Yeah.
So, speaking of artifacts, we have the first artifact in this deck, Rolling Hamsphere. For 7 mana, you get a 4/4 vehicle with crew 3 that says Rolling Hamsphere gets +1/+1 for each hamster you control. Whenever Rolling Hamsphere attacks, create 3 1/1 red hamster creature tokens. Then it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of hamsters you control. It's kind of like somebody took Mere Battlesphere and made it into a hamster-based vehicle.
Yeah, I can see the similarities between this and Mere Battlesphere, though this is strictly better, I think, because it comes down as a 4/4 when you crew it. It immediately turns into a 7/7, which is already better than Mere Battlesphere. Progressively gets bigger the more it stays around because it creates more and more creature tokens, and then it's just throwing around this ever-growing amount of damage to wherever it needs to go, whether that be picking apart creatures or just hitting face if you need that extra reach. So yeah, this is pretty good, all things considered.
It's expensive, but so is Mere Battlesphere.
Mere Battlesphere, though, is one of those that it comes down and it's going to do what it's going to do, and it doesn't get any better unless you're in a dedicated Mere deck or have ways to get more tokens. This thing is a self-contained engine that makes its own tokens and gets better under its own power. So you can just drop this. As long as it keeps swinging in, it's going to continue to do what it does and do so better with each subsequent attack, with each passing turn. So yeah, this thing is going to get a lot of mileage and get out of hand real quickly if your opponents don't deal with it.
To Battlefield's credit, it makes artifacts, which is frequently important. But this at least crews itself after the first activation.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about having spare bodies after the first attack, which is a plus. And then with the Face Commander, you don't have to crew it at all. It just becomes a 4/4, right?
Yep, it should.
So yeah, it immediately animates the vehicle swings in, makes more tokens, doesn't even need a crew so long as you've got your commander, despite your commander being able to crew it.
That's a good point, yeah.
So yeah, I like this one. I like this one in this deck, and I think it's actually going to find a home in token decks in general, because it may be expensive, but it is a finisher that keeps getting more bodies on board, so that's more impact tremor triggers if it's in the deck. It's more bodies to take advantage of anthems. This thing is going to be good here and good in a lot of different decks, I think.
Yeah, probably. So, again, we're artifacts and enchantments. Let's take a look at the new enchantments in the deck. The first of which is our obligatory class, which is Alchemist Talent. For 3 and a red, you get a class that says when Alchemist Talent enters, create 2 tap treasure tokens. You can pay 1 in a red to level it up. You give treasures you control, sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. Then you can pay 4 in a red to get the passive whenever you cast a spell, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast it. This class deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to each opponent.
Well, okay, we found an auto-include for every single treasure deck ever, I think.
Yes. It is 4 mana.
Yeah, but for 4 mana, you're functionally getting a Pirate's Pillage, right? It's the exact same spell on its level 1 that you're paying 4 to create 2 treasures. They come into play tapped, so that's a downside, but for 2 mana more, all your treasures tap for double, so that's just the dragon, right? God, what's that dragon's name?
Goldspan?
Yes, it functionally becomes a second Goldspan dragon for you.
I believe so, yes.
And then when you're spending that mana from treasures to cast anything, it starts dealing damage to all your opponents to burn them down. So yeah, this is pretty good. Again, so far we're just firing on all cylinders with all these new cards because they've all been fantastic. This one automatically slots into all treasure-focused decks. And even if your deck has just a little bit of treasure creation, it still can get you value out of that. Though I think overall we're going to want this one in a dedicated treasure deck to get the absolute most use out of it.
It is also a 4 mana enchantment.
Yeah, which fits for the Face Commander. The only thing I'm concerned about is how much treasure generation does this particular deck have, because Gruul generally doesn't inspire treasure-focused ramp when you think about it. It's generally land-focused ramp, so I'm curious on what the rest of the 99 looks like to see if we're going to get a lot of mileage out of this here.
No. Solid card. Let's look at the last one so we can get to that rest of the 99.
Yeah.
This one is Thickest in the Thicket. For 3 and 2 green, you get an enchantment that says, when Thickest in the Thicket enters, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is that creature's power. At the beginning of your end step, draw 2 cards if you control the creature with the greatest power, or tied for the greatest power.
Okay, so this falls in line with Colossal Majesty?
I think so.
Yeah, Colossal Majesty costs 3, you need a 3-power creature or higher, but it draws you only 1. This only cares about if you have the biggest creature, costs a bit more, but draws you 2. And it also makes the creature bigger when it comes down, so that's not too bad either. Yeah, it goes in +1/+1 counter decks, it goes in big green decks, it goes in stompy decks, and it's just another source of card advantage that takes advantage of gigantic creatures. So yeah, honestly, this is again another fantastic card that is gonna find a home in a lot of different archetypes, because it kind of fits as a reliable source of repeatable card advantage that just sticks around and just makes sure your hand stays full, right?
More or less. It's also an enchantment that does something.
Yeah, it's not just here, draw a card if you have a creature. It also distributes +1/+1 counters, which is going to be potentially a lot of +1/+1 counters depending on what you have on board when this thing comes down.
It just cares about what that creature is, that's all.
Yeah, if you have like Galta, turning Galta in from a 12/12 to a 24/24.
Yeah, that's a big swing.
Yeah, if you're in Stompy, if you're in Big Green, you're going to have 5+ statted creatures all over the place, so that should be simple enough in order to go ahead and make that into a double-sized threat and then just be able to draw cards off that. So yeah, I can see this again being in a lot of different archetypes and again, being able to just generate a disgusting amount of card advantage in those archetypes.
Well, those are all of our new cards, so how about we get down to the value reprints?
All right, let's see what they've decided to bring down in price this time around.
As I talked about in the previous video, these are a little delayed, so a lot of prices have come down a lot, which is great, but it makes it a little harder for me to go back and track to see what was expensive enough to talk about. I've done my best. If I missed something that you guys think was a little bit valuable, feel free to mention it, but let's just get right into it. The closest thing I have to an honorable mention, something that you're going to be happy to see, it is Blasphemous Act.
Yeah, Blasphemous Act is always a staple board wipe, and it's good to see it reprinted just to keep that price down because it always creeps back up to like $2 if you give it long enough.
It has a nice floor of $2, but why can't it have a nice floor of 30 cents?
Yeah, I suspect this thing's always going to hover around $1, but yeah, this is your classic red board wipe. It's efficient, it can cost as little as 1 mana. Yeah, we're not going to complain about seeing this reprinted in this deck because we're definitely going to use it.
It's Blasphemous Act, cool. Moving on. This deck has to be filled with big mana enchantments that do nothing, so why not do Berserker's Onslaught?
Yeah, that's fair. 5 mana, give all your attacking creatures double strike, which means all of your 4/4s are now functionally 8/4 indestructible hasty creatures.
This is now a 5 mana 4/4 with haste and indestructible that when attacking has double strike and gives all your other enchantments double strike when attacking.
Yeah, it's good here. I can't really complain about this.
Yeah, no, it is a card that absolutely makes sense here and very little elsewhere. Again, more things I think you're going to be happy to see as a budget designer overall. Nice, simple, easy, Thran Dynamo.
Yeah, makes sense. Thran Dynamo is always like a $3 card generally, $3-4.
Right now, it's less than that because it's been reprinted.
Yeah, fair. It's a very good piece of colorless ramp.
3 mana for 4 is a good value. Hey, also, this is a 4/4. Huh.
Yeah, if you don't need the mana, you can swing in with it.
Yeah, luckily they do get haste, so you don't have to worry about losing your mana rocks to your commander.
Yeah.
So, do you want more 4 mana enchantments that don't feel like they're ever going to get reprinted? Do I have Path of Discovery for you?
Yeah, Path of Discovery. Okay, I didn't expect to see that here, but I suppose it fits the bill because all your enchantments and your artifacts are creatures when they come down, so they get either a +1/+1 counter or they draw you a land, and you're not going to complain about either.
Yeah, no, it's like, it doesn't trigger on itself because it doesn't see itself entering, even though it enters as a creature, but, well...
It applies to everything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, more value or make your back row guys bigger. Another way to put +1/+1 counters on your back row, so you're really not going to complain about that.
No, it's, again, straightforward, simple, makes sense here. I did not expect this one, though in retrospect I should have. We have Domri, Anarch of Bolas.
Okay, Domri makes your creatures bigger, gives a little bit of ramp, and then is a fight effect on a stick.
Yeah, it's simple, it's short, little out of order. This one was one of the cheapest reprints, but, it's still a nice reprint. Still, that's under $1.
It's fine. Because our creatures are indestructible, that +1 power is less problematic because we don't have to worry about the toughness bump since they're going to always survive combat. The extra ramp is nice. I don't think our back row gets the benefit though because we don't cast them as creatures; they become creatures when they enter. But the fight effect is nice because again, animated back row is indestructible, so we can just fight to our heart's content without having to worry about losing our back row.
Mm-hmm. It's again nice, simple, straightforward. So, do you want more big mana enchantments that don't feel like they belong anywhere else? Because boy, do I have more for you. It's Gratuitous Violence.
Okay, yeah, that, again, fits very well with the fact that our stuff's indestructible because, wait, this isn't symmetrical, is it?
It's not symmetrical.
This is one of the ones that's just our opponents.
It's a creature you control.
Okay, yeah, fair. Okay, that's even better because, we're just going to be just dealing heaps and heaps of damage. So, yeah, this is going to just make our animated army even deadlier.
All of your 4/4s functionally swing in as 8/8s. Hey, what if we give them double strike like earlier? Those are 16/16s functional.
This is looking more and more like we're going to have just a bunch of back row pieces that just make other creatures bigger, thereby making our animated stuff bigger and more dangerous.
Hey, you clued on this with the hamster. How do you make vehicles better?
Having them crew themselves.
Hey, it's a Seeker's Chariot.
Yeah, okay, it's Seeker's Chariot. Makes sense. Free cats, I guess.
Free cats, more free cats to block, or you can, just get more treasures.
Yeah, more treasures, more hamsters, more whatever. Not going to really complain. And one of the big downsides for the Chariot is that it's just a 4/4. You can just get blocked, and this thing just gets you value once. Not a problem if it's indestructible.
Yeah, no, a Seeker's Chariot, it crews itself. It's great. What if it didn't have to? And had haste, and had indestructible.
Yeah, all upside here.
Yes.
Vehicles look like they're going to be real good here, too.
Yeah, and prices slowly ramping up. Things are getting a little bit more expensive. But hey, speaking of more big dumb enchantments, it's Unnatural Growth.
Okay, yeah, Unnatural Growth makes a lot of sense now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Remember our 16/16s from earlier? Well, this will stack with that, making them 32... Well, not 16... They're 32 4s.
I mean, either way, this also pumps toughness, so they'll be slightly bigger than that. But it's a good way to grow our board again, and it looks like it's just stacking on, and stacking on to that whole, all of these enchantments that are just sitting in the back row that make our creatures bigger, therefore make themselves bigger, therefore we're just going to be able to pummel our opponents into the ground with our army of animated back row pieces. And this is fantastic for that. Plus, it's a superb reprint. This thing sits around like $6-7 generally, I think.
No, it was only like 3 or 4 because of the Enchanting Tales reprint.
Having another one just brings the price down even more into the budget range, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah, no. And it's fun that, as you see, more of these enchantments that historically, they don't do anything by themselves. When they're a creature, they're great. And when they have each other, they're even better.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that about Unnatural Growth. Unnatural Growth is just generally good.
Fair. So, you brought her up. She had to show up. It's Ghalta, Primal Hunger.
Yeah, Galt is just a gigantic creature, isn't it?
Yep.
And you're going to generally be able to cast her for 2.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a trampler, and we've already seen that we have a bunch of ways to make our creatures more dangerous. She may not be an enchantment, but she's a 12/12 trampler.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this thing can get into the high double digits worth of damage pretty easily with all the things we've seen so far.
Yeah. To be fair, it's already in the low double digits, so the high double digits is nearly anything.
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen so far, Galta can probably one-shot somebody by herself. If we have haste enablers, which I have not seen so far, I don't think, on the turn she comes down.
I will say, why do you need haste enablers when so many of your creatures already have haste?
That's true. Most of our back row's hasty anyway, so maybe there's just an enchantment that just happens to grant haste incidentally and has another effect. Who knows? We'll see.
Funnily enough, there's a lot of those, but I think they're mostly 3 mana. Hey, you've been talking about how we're going to get so many treasures in this deck. What if I told you that we had a 6 mana 4/4 with Indestructible and Haste called Bootlegger's Stash?
Oh, Bootlegger's Stash got reprinted in this set?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't expect to see that. But again, now that you mention it, it is a artifact that is more than 4, and it just turns all our lands into repeatable treasure generation, so we're really not going to complain about that.
It's absolutely fine. Though, I will add the big caveat here. You're gonna get blown out by exile-based creature removal in this deck.
Yeah, I mean, but so do most people. The only caveat that I see here, on this particular card anyway, is that we're only in 2 colors. The fact that we're getting treasures out of our lands is kind of sort of irrelevant, unless we have a lot of treasure support in the rest of the 99, but it's fine. And even if it doesn't stay here because it doesn't get the most value, you're still going to be happy to have it in a deck that's maybe 3 colors or more treasure focused if this one ends up not being super treasure focused.
Yeah, no, this is interesting. This is an interesting deck. Moving on. This one's just a ramp piece, but it's a wonderful reprint, and I'm just happy it's here. Maybe this might start being a budget card for you. It is Lotus Cobra.
Oh, Lotus Cobra? Okay. It's not bad.
Like $7-8.
Yeah, it's a really good card in the decks that can take advantage of its continual land drops because this can generate you insane amounts of mana on decks that can just get a lot of lands into play. Not sure if this kind of falls into that category because what we've seen so far is most of our ramps coming from treasures and dorks, but it's still a good card to have.
Mm-hmm. Mind you, I will say as much. If there is land-based ramp in this deck, you wouldn't have seen it yet. Those things are all generally really cheap, as you know firsthand.
Most of them. Still working on getting, I think 3 visits is the big one that still hasn't come down in price a whole lot. Still around $3.
So, yet another one. Nice little reprint. We have Kadama of the East Tree.
This is the Kadama that gets things into play for free.
Yes.
Okay. We're running a bunch of high CMC spells, specifically permanents, because they're going to either be enchantments or artifacts. Being able to get those into play reliably is going to be great. And at no mana means we can just get more of them into play, which means we get more bodies, which means we get more ways to pump the board, which means we're going to kill our opponents faster. So not going to really complain about being able to do that.
Yeah, no. Again, we got a handful of nice reprints and a lot of nice little solid, like, oh, that was like $4 or $5. But I think I've saved the 3 nicest reprints for last. They're not huge, but they're still good. Like, they're all cards that I don't think you'd put in a deck.
Okay, well, let's see what they are.
Well, the first of them is Grathama All Devouring.
Why is this in here?
It's a lot of card draw. I mean, an absolutely absurd amount of card draw in your deck.
Yeah, but
When all your indestructible 4/4s get to fight Grathama, you accidentally deck yourself.
yeah, I mean, on the upside here, when Grothama's got a bunch of back row that's making it even bigger, and double strikey, and all this other stuff that's going to allow it to swing in if it survives the fight effects, maybe. I'm not a big fan of this thing. This thing's just weird, but I mean, I can see it. I can see this being a valuable reprint to folks who enjoy the gimmick or just want to build around it or just want a way to, force your opponent's creatures to deal with a gigantic thing that's just standing there menacingly and forcing them to fight.
To be fair, it is May. It's not a forced.
Okay, that's true.
And again, I kid, you're going to draw 8 cards off this unless you make it indestructible.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Like, it's 5 mana for 8 cards. It's fine. Do you want another reason you might want to put in the deck?
Sure.
Our second of 3, which is also an indestructible 4 mana, 4/4 with haste. It's Greater Good.
The Greater Good. Yeah, okay. Greater Good needed a reprint because it's been expensive for a while.
It's like a tenner.
And it's a good way to turn the things we don't need anymore into card advantage. So you can't really complain about being able to turn unwanted creatures, which in this case can also be unwanted back row, into just more ways to refill our hands, and then cherry pick our hands. I'm not sure if this deck has any way to take advantage of its graveyard. I mean, apart from the mana dork we saw earlier, but yes, then you can go ahead and just pitch one of the permanents into the bin that you'd want to reanimate or recur, and then turn this into all upside.
And last, but not least, so I heard you like 4/4s. What if they were 6/6s? It is Tendershoot Dryad.
Oh, the Mad Lads finally did it. They reprinted this stupid Dryad. Okay, yeah. It's Tendershoot Dryad. What do you want from me? It poops out saplings on every player's turn and then makes them bigger. Yeah, sure.
Hey, do you remember that guy who turns all your saplings into mana dorks?
Yeah, this gets even better with him in play and vice versa. This is just a good card, honestly. Yeah. This is just a good card that you stick, and your opponents are just going to need to deal with it. Otherwise, they're just going to slowly lose control of the board to an army of ever-growing saplings. Ironically, maybe not the best card in this particular deck, but it's still going to get a lot of mileage just because we have so many ways to pump our board, our individual creatures. So those 3/3 saplings may turn into 6/6 double strikers, get their stats boosted even further. Yeah, this is still a good include here, even if it's not maybe playing to the archetype what the deck wants to do exactly.
Yeah, regardless of the fact that it isn't necessarily quote-unquote on brand for the deck, it is still a card that is good in the deck.
Yeah.
But that's everything I could conceivably find. Again, I might have missed something that really cratered in price, but I think that means it's time to let you look at the rest.
Yep, let's see what the rest of the 99 has in store for us.
Yep. So we'll be back in a bit to tell you what that is.
Yep.
So, what do you think?
In a few words,
it's 100 cards.
It is, and they are all fantastic, because this deck is amazing.
Every last one of them.
No, not every single one. There's maybe a couple of misses, but overall, this deck is great out of the box. I mean, the land base is on point, which they have been for all the decks mined. We have the usual suspects here: Carplusian Forest, Rootbound Crag, Copperline Gorge, Cinderglade, your typical Gruul land base, right?
It is also a lot easier to get a good mana base for a 2-color deck.
Yeah, that's true. But even considering that, everything else of the core of the deck is still great, because we're looking at our ramp package here. We've got the classics: Farseek, Rampant Growth, Cultivate, all of which you'd expect to have in a deck that has green in it. But also, for the gimmick that we're trying to run, we have Gilded Lotus, for example, which again is a big mana rock you generally wouldn't want to run because maybe it's a bit too slow. But in this deck, it's still a 4/4 indestructible creature you can swing in with if you don't need the mana, right?
Yeah.
So we're good on that front. On the removal side of things, we've got the classic ones. We've got Beast Within, we've got Chaos Warp, Instant Speed, Permanent Destruction that we can use to disrupt our opponents. But again, going into the archetype, we have Spine of Ishah, which again is a gigantic artifact that we blow stuff up with.
You can do better than Spine of Ishah, but it's still fine.
I can agree that we can do better, but it still fits, which is nice to see. There is that internal synergy. Then moving on to our draw package, we've got Garruk's Uprising in here, which is again a fantastic way to just ensure that our creatures can get in for damage and get even more card draw as our animated enchantments come into play as creatures, as 4/4s. Outpost Siege, which is again more impulse draw, which again allows you to use it to swing in when instead of just drawing you cards from the back row. It's all great. It's all either efficient things that you would expect in a Gruul deck, or cards that synergize well with the archetype that the Precon is trying to adhere to, which is great. It's superb deck building. This is like a deck I would build on the channel.
So you would put Itali in this deck?
Okay, maybe not Itali. I can make the argument that Itali probably could stay in the deck, but we could probably swap it out for a vehicle, be a little bit better, a little bit safer because of the indestructibility. But we do kind of want to be careful about cutting that creature base a little too much, because our back row, importantly, are only animated during our turn.
They cannot block for you, no.
Yes, they cannot block for us. So if we go all in on the, I have a bunch of animated back row, yes, on your turns, you're going to be hitting very hard. Your things are going to be very hard to deal with. You're going to be drawing a lot of cards. During your opponent's 3 turns, you're going to get your teeth kicked in.
Yep, you will get hit back.
Yes, so that's something to definitely worry about.
I believe we established this earlier. This deck can do very scary things. It's got a ramp into it, and it takes a little bit of time, and they are incredibly obvious. And you'll get blown out by a path or a swords or anything like that. But it's scary. You might not actually be the biggest threat at the table, but you'll look like the biggest threat.
Yeah, because your turns are going to be very, very dangerous, right? We've already seen that we have a lot of very dangerous cards between Berserker's Onslaught, between Unnatural Growth, and then cards that we haven't talked about, like Sunbird's Invocation, which generally is a very slow, dirtily do-nothing card, but when it comes down as a 4/4 that you can swing in with immediately becomes better, and then we're getting free spells as we cast our spells.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Then Warstorm Surge, which is again another giant, generally kind of unwieldy top-end enchantment, which becomes instantly better when it's an indestructible creature, and then it lets us throw around 4 damage to face, 4 damage to creatures. These are all great includes, and yeah, this is hands down the best precon from this particular cycle that I have seen so far. Maybe the last one potentially could be better, we'll have to see, but so far I am very, very impressed with this. And I'd be hard-pressed to, in good faith, say that I'm finding any glaring weaknesses or glaring problems with this out of the box.
It is very straightforward, and it really helps that it's straightforward.
Yeah. The game plan's simple. Play back row, turn it into creatures. That back row is powering itself up, powering your other creatures, swing for face, and constantly do that.
I alluded to this earlier, that I would bring it up later. And like we said, Wild Seer does have multiple directions it can go in. I do think there's an Aristocrats deck, specifically an artifact-based one, buried somewhere in Bellow. Like, just starting to do some degenerate Aristocrat-style things by turning your artifacts that are not normally artifacts into creatures. But that's neither here nor there. As it is, this deck just wants to hit other people, and it will do that.
Yeah, if we were to take Bellow in a vacuum, there's a couple of different directions we can take him in, right? But in this particular deck, he just wants to get on board alongside a bunch of back row, swing for the fences, generate a small card advantage as he does so we can go ahead and play more back row that turns into more creatures, that turns into more draw, and eventually our opponents are just going to fold under the relentless onslaught of our back row, right? That's the game plan.
Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be an obvious upgrade path for you, and not a hard one.
No, I agree, because it is at its core a very simple game plan, and honestly, off the top, I think maybe a few more vehicles here and there. If we want to get particularly spicy, we can put some of the Warhammer 40k Titans in here, because again, them being able to crew themselves is a big plus, because that may be something that a lot of people that are playing Bellow may overlook, that, vehicles can crew themselves with his own ability. So I think that would be some obvious choices, but otherwise, yeah, I think I'm going to be hard-pressed to find a lot of cards to swap out of them, because a lot of these are just good here, right?
Yeah, no, just most of these cards feel genuinely good.
Yeah, I love this. It's a win I needed, because the other two decks, particularly the last one we covered, Family Matters, left me concerned of what was going on over there at the Wizards' offices. But this one brought me back.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you like this one.
I mean, do you have any particular thoughts on this one outside of what I already covered?
No, not really. It is a fine deck that, it doesn't blow me away. It's not insane. I think all of the Modern Horizons 3 decks are better, but this is still good.
Well, yeah, but all the Modern Horizons 3 decks were also probably double in price.
Yes.
And the Eldrazi one was quadruple in price, so,
Something ridiculous like that, yeah.
Yeah. But for the face of it, maybe this one isn't worth as much as the other ones for Modern Horizons 3. Maybe it doesn't have as high reprint value, but as just a cohesive deck that you can take and go to your local game store and just crack open and play a game, this is still going to be able to hang, I think, pretty good, even with more expensive decks.
I can see it. Again, there's definitely some spots where this deck's going to get blown out, but still, yeah, good deck.
Alrighty, and with that, that's another one in the books, so let us know in the comments how you enjoyed this deck, and otherwise, this has been Grazzet.
And I'm Kaprak.
And have a good one, folks, and stay safe.